You were not hired to be an order taker. You were hired to steward a brand. And, that's different than being like an on-call Canva elf.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Willsea, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday, I'll break down what actually matters. Fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse. Today's episode is not your typical conference panel recap. We're reopening the Enrollify Clubhouse, the AMA stage where polite conference decorum went to die. If you were in that room, you know it was a Bravo-style reunion complete with sparkling rosé, where we aired out the industry group chat, decoded the side eyes, and said the quiet parts out loud. Now, the crew that caused all that delightful chaos is back. Same panel, same energy, same willingness to throw a little friendly shade at the buzzwords and culture and systems that we're all tiptoeing around. It's like we're back at AMA, but now we don't have to pretend the exhibit hall can't hear us. Jaime, Safi, Carrie, the Enrollify creator trio who lit up the AMA stage are here, and we're not even pretending to behave this time. Ladies, welcome back to the Clubhouse.
Thanks for having us, Mallory. The only thing that's missing is our champagne.
Oh,
There's no champagne this go round.
Molly from Element was clutch. Listen, no one knows this. She ran down to the market in the Gaylord 4 minutes before we went on stage, and she came back up with a sparkling bottle of rosé, and it just completed the look, y'all.
It really did.
Perfection.
Absolutely. Jaime, how are you in your post-AMA hangover?
I'm doing well, but it feels so sad. It's my favorite week of the year. It feels more like homecoming than a conference. Like you get to catch up with all your friends that you went to school with or whatever. I miss everyone.
Oh, I do too. And Carrie, are we just in circle back season on a campus now?
You know, it is. It is. It's that time to start thinking about all the things we're trying to get wrapped up. You come back from AMA and it's immediately like, oh my goodness, all these things need to happen before the holidays.
For real. All right. Well, the conversation we're going to have today was born on stage at the 2025 AMA Symposium for the Marketing of Higher Education, a session we called Leading with Vision. Now, if you were in that room, you know this was not a typical panel. It had more of that Bravo reunion special vibe than conference breakout. And we put higher ed's unwritten rules and buzzwords under the lights, from the overused marketing language we're just sick of hearing to AI theatrics and the collective meltdown over the Featherstone campaign. The point wasn't to chase controversy. It was to pull back the curtain on what leaders are actually wrestling with right now. Things like shrinking budgets and shifting student behavior, a pace of change that is thrilling and exhausting. And we used humor to get the room to collectively exhale, but the tension underneath is still real. Higher ed wants to move faster and take bolder swings, but culture, committees, and a fear of failure keep pulling us back into a safe zone. So today, we're going to recreate that same panel energy for our Pulse listeners. I'm so excited, ladies, that you have joined me on this episode. Let's just dive right in. Now, on stage at AMA, we kicked off by dragging some of higher ed's most overused words. So I want to start there. Carrie, now that you've had time to recover, what's that one phrase that is still making your eye twitch?
You know, it's all about telling our story better. If we could just tell our story better. I'm staying with that. That was the original and we're going back to it.
More authentically too. Yes, of course. Jaime, what about you?
I'm going to say reporting tactics instead of KPIs. Saying that we checked something off a list is not a KPI, but I would wager that a large number of our reports are actually just making a list of tactics.
And for me, I'm going to keep mine the same, and it's meeting students where they are. We want to meet students where they are. And I feel like sometimes we are not, we say we're doing that, but we're completely missing message. We're completely missing motivation. We're just on the platform. They're in TikTok. That's where we're at. But like, it's more than that. And sometimes I actually don't think they want us to meet them where they are. They actually want us to just leave them alone, actually.
Right?
Like when your mom first joined Facebook and you're like, oh no.
Exactly that.
Mom, do not meet me where I am. Please, no.
Please, no.
Please, no. So when we were on stage, we wasted no time. We dove right into the Featherstone University campaign that sent higher ed into a full spiral this fall. Now, listeners, if you're still not familiar with it, hit pause. Go listen to the conversation I had with David Ludlam, the SVP of Comms from Colorado Mesa last month on this podcast. And now you've unpaused, you're back. Ladies, the dust has settled from this campaign, right? It's not making the news headlines anymore, but let's think about it postmortem. Like, what did that collective meltdown from all of the CMOs and CCOs in our industry tell you about our sector's tolerance for contrast marketing, satire, or literally anything that just steps outside of an approved brand box? Jaime?
Oh my gosh. I feel like the reaction to that campaign was really about people feeling like a mixture of either disbelief, like I can't believe they got away with this, and envy. Because it was brilliant. It was outside the box. It put them on the map. It did exactly what it was intending to do. So there is a certain level of envy I think we have about that. And I think that was a big part of the collective meltdown. Like, they got to do something I would never be able to do at the institution I'm at.
Yeah. And that's like actually true. Like I don't think an Ivy League institution or a tier 1 could pull that move off. Carrie, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they could pull that off. I think, where my head goes is this crossroads. I think part of me says, they know their audience and they knew their audience would appreciate it and get it. The other part of my brain says, but man, this is a tough time in our industry and we all need to be there together and we all need to be supporting each other. And so I'm having that internal debate with myself.
Yeah. What do you think, Safi?
I, being from South Carolina, good old country girl, we have this saying, right? Hit dogs holler. And that means if it doesn't apply to you, you're not screaming, kicking, and crying. So the folks that came forward, the universities that came forward, is kind of like the hit dog holler kind of situation. It's like, why are you so upset? Why are you so mad? This struck a nerve in you for a very particular reason. And I think the universities that kind of were up in arms about that, you've got to sit with it and understand why that made you uncomfortable. Not just as your only university, but why you looked out and were like looking, amongst your peers and saying, is no one else upset about this? And trying to understand why taking this approach as a university made you feel uncomfortable. What does that say about you? What does that say about the culture at your university? Or like you said, Mallory and Carrie, it's like, what does that say about the industry as a whole? So my thing was, to me, I felt like it was a really great opportunity to start opening up those conversations and start looking in, being reflective.
Yeah. So I want to know if your answer has changed in the last couple weeks, y'all. Like, if the brief had landed on your desk, what would you have done first? Jaime?
Yeah. So first of all, I would thank my team for having the courage to bring such an out of the box idea to me. My answer really hasn't changed. I think that it is a sign of great psychological safety that the leadership has created, that they felt comfortable to bring something this far outside of the box forward. And I think even if it's something that you don't feel like you could get away with doing at your institution, I think applauding the courage it took to bring something like that forward is a great first step, because there will be an idea at some point that is outside the box and super creative that you can do. And if you shut down everything or you don't bring me crazy stuff, you're never going to get that outside the box idea that's viable coming forward. So that would be my first step. And that has not changed.
Carrie, you're the one person here who actually works on a campus, right? Like you are actually the person who could get that brief on her desk tomorrow. Like where are you at?
I still go with what I said in the conversation. And that's first thing is I would want to marinate on this. I think it's really important to sit with things and to give it some space and to have some time with it. But I think the other thing that is really important in this whole thing is that we think about it iteratively. I don't want somebody to get so far along in a concept that they've fallen in love with it and we've gone too far down a train track. I think it's so much better if we bring our leadership and our teams in and start those conversations when it's just that spark of an idea of a what if, and then we can start the conversation there. So I really hope that it doesn't get to my desk, that we've been in conversation before it ever got there.
You know, Safi, it strikes me that sometimes our industry likes to solve for safety instead of progress. And I'm, in the context of this conversation, like, what's something a leader could do tomorrow to start to build a culture and a team that is confident enough to take this level of a risk?
I think supporting folks and empowering folks who their competitive advantage on the team is just strong gut instinct. You have folks that are on a team, or sometimes you work in a marketing department culture where someone is always kind of like that canary in the coal mine. They're like, wait, before we do this, wait, before we do this. Like, they have that just natural inclination to say, wait, hold on. Almost like Carrie, where she's saying, we need to pause. We need to look at this. But there are so many times where we got to get this across the finish line. This has to go to board next week. We have to do this. We have to do that. And over time, because I've been this person in an organization where you just sometimes you sit quiet. You're like, hey, you know what? I have brought up flag after flag after flag. I feel like a color guard just out there just with all these flags. And at some point, people start ignoring the flags and you're like, okay, I'm just going to sit quiet. So then when something like a Featherstone brief comes across and you know it's spicy, you know that it's going to ruffle feathers, you're looking to your canaries and there's nobody around because we're like, well, is this a safe place for us to share what we really think about this, or that you're afraid they're going to candy code an answer and not actually pick it apart? Another piece is also being very grounded in your data. Social listening, the research reports, the IDIs, the listening sessions, making sure that before we do a campaign like this, because if we do get blowback, we want to say we were following a data trail here and we just happened to go off a little bit, versus saying, like Harry said, this was someone's passion project for their portfolio and we decided to go 10 toes down. No, this was a data-driven decision. So one, protecting the canaries in the coal mine, and two, backing it up with data.
Ladies, anything else to add?
I would just add that I did a project when I was at Radford University where we turned over our entire homepage and made all the student profiles be monsters on a Halloween. So there was like a Frankenstein monster, a vampire, et cetera, a zombie. We went all in. It was intense, written the profiles, all of that. And I remember the president's chief of staff was like, I don't know if I want to bring this to the president or not, but like kind of I had credibility with her, right? And that level of credibility is so important that you foster that, so that when she brought the idea to the president was like, you know what? Sure, do it. And it ended up, we had a major spike in visits to our admissions website. It got covered in the Washington Post. Like, it was huge for drawing visibility to the institution. And it was relatively low risk, right? Because Halloween's a holiday where you have fun. But I needed to have that credibility. I couldn't just walk in on my first day and say, I've got this zany idea, let me do it. You have to build credibility for doing the things that Safi just said, which is they have to know that you're looking at the data. They have to know that you understand calculated risks. I just think if we don't have those relationships built, we're not going to be able to pull this work off.
So we played a little guessing game, ChatGPT or C-Suite. It was my favorite part of the panel. I'll say that. So if you weren't in the room, what we did was we put up a bunch of quotes and asked the audience to guess whether ChatGPT wrote the quote or someone from a C-Suite. And it was really fun. But like, for the most part, people got it wrong. Like, more than half the audience completely got it wrong more than half the time. So like, Carrie, what does it say about AI and communications that the room couldn't tell the difference between something that the former CMO at Airbnb said versus ChatGPT?
I think it tells us, that our GPTs are getting better and the language models are learned off of human behavior and they're learned off of what people say naturally. So I think, it's something that we've got to just be paying attention to and working toward and continually evolving how we use that work.
Did you guys see that ChatGPT put? I saw it on Instagram. But it was like an apology for overusing the M dash when they released the 5.1 model.
And that was my favorite punctuation. They were destroying my life. It was hard.
I love an M dash,
Yes.
and I like now I feel guilty about an M dash.
Same.
It's horrible.
And like one thing we also talked about too was the fact that in some, not in my organization, of course, that people are actually purposely leaving errors in things so that it's not too polished. And I also think it means a lot and says a lot about the mode of communication as well. Because when we, like Mallory, I feel like if you had just read them out loud versus people seeing them as well, if that makes a difference, where if you're reading something, you can detect, oh, this is ChatGPT versus whether it was scripted in a video or even like in some type of design or in print, like in a book or something. And I also think that kind of was playing with my mind too, because you were reading it and I'm sure people were just listening to you speak. And then maybe some people were looking at the screen, they saw the M dash and thought, but they couldn't hear you speak the M dash because you didn't go M dash. So I also think that has a role or plays a role in that, is like, does the mode that it's delivered in also make it harder to detect when it's not just a LinkedIn thought leadership post that has an M dash and now we just think
And
it's
77 emojis with it.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm rewatching House of Cards, and I swear ChatGPT was trained on Frank Underwood's speeches because he's constantly doing but the hard truth is, and it's like, I'm pretty sure they had Kevin Spacey's scripts and used them to train ChatGPT.
It's not this, it's that.
Yes.
Here's a quick word from our sponsor. Southeast Missouri State University needed to launch more targeted campaigns faster, yet they were bogged down by manual campaign builds, slow approvals, and vendor overload. With Element 451, they eliminated 5 vendor tools and gained marketing superpowers in one platform. They saw a 13% increase in applications, processed applications within 2 days, and achieved 33 to 35% email open rates. The impact: personalized, automated campaigns running at scale without the drag. Ready to turn your next campaign around in hours, not weeks? Try an agent today at element451.com/agents. My gosh, I've uploaded like a Mallory brand voice and tone into ChatGPT, and I feel like I'm constantly re-uploading it, being like, no, like come back to this document. But in that doc, I like specifically had to say like, kill the M dashes, like get rid of the it's not this, it's this thing, like, and even still, it's still like. Still F's up all the time. Hey, speaking of effing up, I called out higher ed's favorite operating system at AMA, FOFU, also known as the fear of effing up. So bring it back to the Clubhouse, ladies. What's one time your fear of messing up almost held you back, and how'd you push through it? Safi?
Woo, I've done this so much.
Do you want an example from today or
or today, yesterday, tomorrow that I'm anticipating? Yeah. I think for me, and my answer is going to be different from what I gave, but I think it really, because Carrie just kind of planted that seed of trying to go too fast, working on a campaign, wanting to do a trend and saying, we got to get on it before it's cold, old and covered in mold. And the creative was janky. We didn't quite get the language and like audience alignment right. And it just was not a good look like for the brand. And that like sticks in my mind of like, one, taste and discernment. Just because it's a trend, learning really early on, you don't have to hop on every trend just because it's trendy. And two, even with a trend, you do have a window. I feel like sometimes we feel like we don't have a window, like the trend is going to be over by tomorrow. There is a little bit of a window sometimes for you to kind of get your ducks in a row and figure out how you're going to align the trend with your brand and your message. So for me, that even now, like sometimes like my fear, I don't want to say the word because I don't know if they bleep it out on here. Was it FOFU?
Fofu.
FOFU sometimes it's like I'm almost anti-trend now where I'm like I've been burned by trying to participate in a trend now. So no trends. We're evergreen family over here. But knowing that, trends, they do serve a purpose. And also, especially when we're thinking about a Gen Z or Gen Alpha audience, just being able to connect with them and know that we're trendy and kind of listening to and meeting them where they are. And knowing that that's important. So for me, the FOFU comes from being burned by trends and just making sure that, I got all the lights on before I press send on a trend.
For me, it was all about budget. I was a new manager. I was super excited to be in charge. I got to make creative decisions and I got to be involved in all of this fun stuff. And I didn't take into account the fact that I also had to manage the budget now. And when people needed things and, as we were placing media, that had associated costs. And so by the time I got my head around the budget, we were 5 figures over budget. And so, man, what a first impression of they've just given you this role in an interim capacity, no less. Interim capacity. And you're like full speed ahead, right off the cliff, and had to walk that back and own that. So very humbling experience. Moving forward, I now really try to get to know the finance team, but also really understand the budget and have figured out how to kind of track and train how to keep track of it in a way that works for me, in a way that I can stay on top of it. That was a big old slice of humble pie.
I'm going to give a different example than what I gave at AMA.
Not allowed. No, I'm kidding.
No, ma'am.
Right. I don't want any recording of me saying what my example was.
Yeah, that's fair. No, that's also fair.
Right. But I would say I haven't always worked in environments where I've had psychological safety. And so it's not exactly the fear of failure. It's the fear of negative feedback from a leader. And I know I'm not the only one that has experienced this. And it has caused me to not take risks that are necessary. So I end up with the 3 under a tree or whatever it is, like the backpack, the fall, there's the United Colors of Bennington, sitting around the tree, when really something more bold and risky was needed. And I think that's a big problem in higher ed, actually. Like, if we are so afraid of any level of negative reaction. And some people have worked for presidents where if one person calls and complains about something, you have to yank something off of a social channel. And I just think that keeps us from taking the kind of risks and making the bold moves that we need to be making.
Preach, please. Oh, I can't talk about it on the mic, sorry, but I was just having a conversation with someone about an hour and a half ago about what you were just talking about, Jaime. And it is so real. It's real in agencies. It's real in ed tech. It's real on campuses. There is no greener grass. I think that is a top-down leadership challenge that if you are preaching, you want people to fail fast, you got to give them the psychological safety to fail quickly.
I had to Google what psychological safety was because I was like, what is that? Never experienced it.
Oh my God. Oh my gosh. So, hey, at AMA, we also talked about this crazy scenario, what we called AI Goes Wild, where we created a fake, but could be very real scenario where an AI generated fundraising campaign became the biggest giving year in your hypothetical institution's history. But then you find out the emotional anchor story was completely fabricated by the model and no one caught it. So I do want to revisit that here because I actually this is going to happen to some institution. It might not be a fundraising campaign, but it's going to happen somewhere. And if you're the chief communications officer in that moment, what do you do? Because there's one path where you come clean. And in this scenario, that risks the gifts and the accolades and the positive press. But on the other side, I could see some CCOs saying, no, I'm going to stay quiet and just tighten the guardrails next time and hope that nobody finds out. And it is plausible that nobody could find out. And look, I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong. You guys can say if there's a right or a wrong. I'm not saying if there's a right or wrong. I'm just saying those are two ends of the spectrum. And I can see leaders making both choices. Carrie, I'm throwing it to you because you're on campus resident
Yeah.
expert here. What would you do?
So step one, I'm going to call our chancellor. This is going to be one of those, I think, that's big enough that she wasn't in any way involved in the situation, but she's going to have to be involved in how we handle it, because she's going to be the one at the end of the day that it falls on her name and her administration. And so I think step one is call her. My gut check is that we own it. I think about Tylenol a few years ago. Best practice PR study of kind of how to own it, and they've rebounded from that. But I think my initial step is she needs to be in the conversation and needs to know what's happening. If it's made it to my desk, there are people in our staff and our team that know it, so it's going to be out there soon, and so she needs to be brought in quickly.
I've worked for 3 different leaders that would have given me a different answer to this question. But my recommendation would be to own it, because I feel like if we're talking about authenticity, if we're talking about being transparent and honest and we have integrity, and then we don't own an F up that is that big, I honestly think that there's very high likelihood that it's going to get discovered, and it is way worse for you to have pushed it under the rug than it is to have just dealt with it. And I would also say, if you're at a public university, FOIA can happen, and those emails that said that you knew are impossible to deny at that point.
Yeah, and to me, trust is as much of a currency as the dollar is, and to think that we can forsake one for the other, I think would be a big mistake. So owning it, we all hallucinate, right? So just own it. AI hallucinates, I hallucinate. Let's just get in there, own it. And also I think, from my seat, especially being someone that is tasked with the campaign or the reposition or the pivot, I could also foresee it being a really cool opportunity to open up the doors to have conversation about AI literacy. Hey, as a university, we made a really big mistake here. We are looking at process. How do you look at process? We are looking at how to properly vet and approve things that we're getting out of a GPT. How are you getting it? And, I have the luxury of living in the Triangle here in North Carolina. So it's we could partner with an IBM. We can partner with a Cisco or a Lenovo here and really turn it into a really great learning environment that kind of stemmed from that mistake. So owning it and turning it into a learning opportunity for sure.
I love that. That's my favorite answer. Sorry, Jamie and Carrie. That was my favorite answer. All right.
Ooh, what do I win?
The next question. We're going to start winding down here. I got 2 questions left. We did some rapid fire stuff on stage. This is one I did not throw at you ladies. So surprise question. Now, if you could hand every Marcom leader one permission slip, what is the thing they need to stop apologizing for in 2026? Safi, you won the question first.
I think that we can stop making excuses and apologizing for slowing down.
Ooh, good one.
Being able to say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry we took an extra week to look at this, or I'm so sorry that we're going to table this. And I think Carrie's answer just really sat with me of marinating. And sometimes you do have to slow down to speed up. And we don't need to apologize for taking the extra step to make sure that something is excellent. We should never apologize for taking the extra time to get it in front of a listening group or out in front of a group to make sure that it's not harmful, that it's not disrespectful, that it's not rude. And I just don't think that we should be apologizing for slowing down.
Isn't it that Modern Family quote, fast is slow and slow is smooth?
There we go. Nailed it.
All right, Jamie, what's your answer?
I think Marcom leaders really need to stop apologizing for having a seat at the table. I think too many marketers walk into cabinet meetings and act like they're guests rather than expected participants in institutional strategy. And I think that is such a problem, because marketing is one of those few functions that touches every single audience the institution serves. And no one else can really see that full ecosystem. And we need to own our place at the table, walk in with confidence, say, I belong here and I have unique things to contribute to this conversation. and then do it. If you have a seat at the table and you are not using it, you don't belong at the table. Like, use your seat, use your voice, use your power, and stop apologizing for it. You belong there.
All right, Carrie.
I think we've got to stop apologizing for strategy. I think sometimes we've focused so much on wanting to do the tactical and we go to that space that we don't spend enough time on the strategy. I think we got to stop and focus on those pieces. We just launched a web redesign and re-architecture this year. And that was one of the biggest takeaways from our learning, is that people crave that strategy and that understanding of the why. And Safi, to your point, we had to slow down a little bit to really make sure we had time to articulate that and explain that. But man, when we did, we ended up being on time, under budget, and zero issues with it. But I think it's to both of those points, we got the strategy right, and then we slowed down to articulate it, and then could get that smoothness to get it right.
Along these lines, I'm giving the Marcom leader the permission slip to stop apologizing for saying no. Like, you were not hired to be an order taker. You were hired to steward a brand. And, that's different than being like an on-call Canva elf. So I think...
I love that.
Is the season.
But it's almost the season for that little Canva elf thing that pops up with everybody's out. It's always fun when that pops around.
It is always fun, but that's not your job. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it does make for a great laugh. I just need a little bit more pink in one.
Oh, fair enough. So we couldn't say everything on stage. And maybe, as you've had a couple weeks to marinate, our favorite word of today's podcast, maybe there's something that you wanted to say that you didn't because, microphone sponsors, ballroom full of people, all those things. So what's that one thing you didn't say? I'm giving you the mic now, and this is how we're going to close it out. Jaime, I'm tossing it to you.
Well, there's very little I won't say, as I think we discovered at the session last time. But I one thing I didn't say that I would want people to hear is that if you are in a situation with it's a toxic environment, or there's poor leadership, or you're not given the resources that you need to be successful, do not be afraid to move on. And I hate to see people leave higher ed, and I'm not saying leave higher ed, but don't be afraid to move on if it's not a safe place for you. Not just like the toxicity, but also the psychological safety. You deserve to be at a place that recognizes and appreciates the beautiful mind that you have, and get into that space, because it's amazing once you get there.
And I'll add on to Jamie's, this is the perfect time to recalibrate your why. Like, we are just living in a time where everyone's questioning everything. We don't know what's AI and what's not based on, that activity we did. And this is a really great time to think about why you show up to work every day, reevaluate, and kind of do a self-assessment of how you're treating others, how you're showing up for others. And if you're like, man, I've been a crab apple and people have been a crab apple to me, why? What is the why? Are you showing up like with that mindset of I'm working in higher ed, or I'm working in this industry and it's making a difference? And I think this is just a really great time, because especially coming from AMA, so many people are talking about how they feel, even though it's very difficult right now, they feel energized and they feel like this sense of renewal, because we got to stand on stuff now. Like, if we can't let things idly, it's going to crumble if we don't maintain it. But there's also the underbelly of, people maybe who are a little bit more quiet. People are like, am I ready to put up this fight today? I'm tired. So just being able to recalibrate that why and kind of build on to Jamie's answer.
My heart is always with that emerging leader, that person that's looking for that next step and trying to figure out how to get there. And as I sat on that panel with all of you incredible women, I couldn't help but think, man, this is progress, not perfection. There are so many times that we've made mistakes. There are so many times that, we had that moment that didn't go according to plan, but not everybody sees those pieces. And so I think it's just really important to call out and to honor the fact that we're not perfect. No one is perfect. But we're all in this to support and grow that next generation of leaders. And if you're someone that's listening and watching this and you're in that space, I think it's also really important to know that you can do this and you're incredibly talented, and there's an amazing community that believes in you and wants to see you succeed.
Amazing way to end this one. Y'all, if we were in a room full of people, I think they'd be on their feet cheering and clapping. This was just so much fun. I'm glad we got the band back together. Little less champagne, but still all the receipts, all the hot takes. And folks, if you enjoyed this episode, you know where to go. Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to this podcast, a rating and a review is how this show keeps growing, and it's how they keep me around. So, help a girl out. Panel, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, as Carrie said, sometimes it's okay to say no.
And sometimes it is. With that, we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.